of circular economy, the success of a startup relies on the collaboration of the entire ecosystem. The right recipe brings together innovation, investment, the supply chain, the buying decisions of consumers, and the way products will be disposed of. Startups are best placed to have an impact on circularity due to their size. They can adapt much quicker, innovate, and the way they work is much more linear than large organizations. On the flip side, startups' life is full of landmines. As exciting as it is, there are many challenges along the way. Smaller budgets, they might not have all of the key players in their teams, and they might not have the network that they need to influence the entire ecosystem, policymakers, and even the buying habits of their potential customers. So how can startups design products to support a circular economy? This is what we are going to look at in this episode. We are going to first explain a little bit what circular economy is and what the potential that it brings for startups out there, whether you've already started or you are thinking about joining impact startups. And in fact, what I'm really excited about is that not just this episode, but the next 3 episodes will really dive into this concept. So if you have any questions on how to attract clients, how to tell your story, how to deal with investors, then do subscribe to our podcast to find out more. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naili Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and advisor, I will answer live the burning questions that you have on your way to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips and to meet amazing guests. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, we are in a world where there is a lot of buzzwords and a lot of big words going out there, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. And in fact, while I was doing this research and preparing for this show, I spoke to a lot of people who might not be very close to technology, might know what's happening with climate change and what's happening in the world, but they were not really sure about the concept of circular economy or even the word conscious consumerism, which is something that people talk a lot about. So just to really go through that very quickly, when we start looking at circular economy, it's really trying to move beyond just the issue of waste management. When we look at the fight for leaving the world a better place, especially when we look at the fact that minerals and resources are not as much as they we used to have years and years ago, and again, what's happening with the climate and absolutely everything, the first fight, one of the first things that we did was really to kind of change behaviors, right? Reducing plastic usage as much as we could, recycling more. And that's great, but unfortunately, this is not going to help us moving forward. And this is where I think is really exciting space for startups. The issue that we have with waste management is that, unlike what people might think, it's great to recycle, but it's still quite consuming in terms of the process of converting material that would otherwise end up in the landfills. It's not cheap. And also that process also we kind of create even more waste in a way. So now the focus is on moving a little bit higher in the chain and think about what is it that we can do, whether it's a new concept or ideas from startups, all the way to the behaviors of the people involved in the ecosystem. One of the nice things that we are going to really introduce very quickly, because again, this is not going to be a talk on circular economy. It's not about theory. It's really about practical things that a startup can do today, or someone who's already working for a startup that are dealing with those challenges. You can pick it up and you can go forward. And we also wanted this episode, as it's the first in a series of 3 episodes, to really lay the land for those who might not know what we are going to be talking about a lot, especially with the fantastic guests that we have coming up. So I'm going to mention them in a bit. So this is really what we wanted to kind of look at. When we looked at this idea of what can we do to really start thinking about designing products that will help us in the future, especially when we start looking at circular economy, again, as I've mentioned before, is thinking about the gaps that we have in the entire supply chain. all the way from the people at the very beginning when it comes to, for example, if you're looking at coffee, the people that will be involved in terms of farming, producing the coffee, to transportation, supply chain, logistics, all the way to the coffee beans, getting into your favorite coffee shop, being used, and then how do you dispose of everything? As a startup, it gives you a lot of interesting ways of improving that process. But of course, you cannot do it alone. So when people talk about just recycling, recycling is only one way of doing it. And for those who might not be aware of, there is this thing called an R ladder, which is a really nice concept and really an easy way of helping people understand how you can position your ideas as you are developing your products, right? Again, even if you don't think that your product will improve the chain, the supply chain, but as you are now starting to think about your product, how can you do that in a way that you either refuse, reduce, or use less material? So this is the first stage of the R diagram, where there are three different principles: refuse, reduce, and redesign. And it's really about challenging the conceptions that people have today about how to build their products. In one of the nice ways I've seen that being used was actually, I can't remember exactly which company, I don't know if it's Ariel or whatever brand, but it's just washing tablets, right? Usually they used to come in plastic packages up to, well, last time I bought them was, I think, two weeks ago. Always buy the same brand, always in plastic packaging. Now, what was very interesting when we start talking about these elements of innovation into the circular economy and how we can reduce is the fact that they have come up with a completely new product. Rather than being into a plastic packaging, they used a very sturdy cardboard box, and it's really, really nice. So when I first saw it in the shops, I thought, okay, so is it going to hold? Is it really what we need? But what I loved about it, it wasn't just, hey, here's a box, a cardboard box, put some washing liquid in there. So what they've done, they've thought about the locking mechanism, because of course the parents will put that in the kitchen, young kids might go and start playing with it. So even the locking mechanism, although it's made of a sturdy cardboard box, they still thought a way where if you lift it from the top, it doesn't open up, just as the same as it was working before with a plastic packaging. So for me, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And this is really the kind of things that people are thinking about in terms of redesigning from the packaging, from the beginning, all the way through. So if you are a startup and you are coming up with new ideas, then yes, I will definitely encourage you to kind of look out there and think about you might not change all of the components that you have, especially as we know, as I mentioned before, startups face a lot of challenges, but you might be able to come up and innovate in a different way. Looking at the same ladder, the next three things we look at are reuse, repair, and refurbish, right? So these are still in the stages within the R ladder that I'm thinking about. Now, those three components really focuses on extending the use of the product. The first one is thinking about at the very beginning of you building your startup, refuse, reduce, redesign, and now reuse, repair, refurbish is about extending the use of your product. Some great models out there, again, so like we say, there's not a lot of things these days that have never been done. But what is happening now is that how people are thinking differently and really helping people to connect and do this. When we look at extending the use of the product, think about a bike repair shop. This is not a new concept. I've seen that in other communities in the past, where people will go in, they're like a bike repair cafe, where people will go and exchange bikes. When your kids, for example, are older, rather than trying to just dump it somewhere, you actually dispose it in a way that maybe someone else can reuse that. The less materials that goes into landmines or that goes into recycling, the better it is. And that's where lies an opportunity in terms of innovations and for startups. One thing, again, that happened very recently that made me think about that was at my one of the co-workings I go to. They had an event where they've asked every single person to bring 3 items of clothing, and you will go and just go into a room, and then you can swap it with other people. That was quite exciting because, let's face it, how many people have clothes in their wardrobes that they never worn, or they might wear when they eventually, I don't know, to lose weight or put more weight on, or whatever it is, or for an occasion that will never come, right? And the same applies to many things that we have, especially if you have an attic, or even, those rooms where there's like or those cupboards that, as soon as you open the door, things come flowing. You don't even know what's in there. But maybe what is not useful to you could go to someone else. And the reason why it's also very interesting to think about is that if you don't do it now, you might think about reusing when you're moving houses. By that point, I can tell you that trying to dispose of it in the best ethical way will be the last priority in your mind, as you will have so many other things to worry about. And again, when we go back to this concept of startups, there are some startups now that are thinking about this concept. What can we do to help people get rid of things that they have in their house? Or what can we do to help people to, by the time that they are buying the product, so that they can help people kind of dispose it the right way. Now, when you're looking into that, if you are startups into this extended use of the product, so the reuse, repair, refurbish, or part of the R ladder, one of the things you might worry about is how do you help people think about that concept as part of their lifetime. Later on, we are going to talk a little bit about storytelling, because that's something that's really important. But for you, you need to think about at which point of the interaction your consumers will have with the product, can you help them to have that in mind? If you tell them too early, they will never remember. If you don't never tell them, or maybe put on social media, they might not find out about it. So we will talk a little bit more about storytelling and how you can use that to also push the agenda. And you might also wonder, how can we help with this entire supply chain in a way, because your application or your startup might only do one part of the problem. So there was one interesting startup that I've seen online. It's called Bike Flip. And their initial purpose was to really improve and help repurpose the world of bikes, which is very, very interesting. Now they've rebranded themselves into a marketplace for bike lovers, but their original idea was really to help this idea of abandoned bikes, especially kids' bikes. So how can you get bikes, refurbish them, and sell them as secondhand on a subscription model? And again, this is very attractive because as a parent, for example, you might not want to rather than buy a bike for your child, especially kids grow quite fast, you might actually lease the bike for a few months and then buy the bike from them and sell it back to them. They refurbish that and give it to someone else. Of course, if this is a model that you're thinking for your startup, you'd also need to think about, the supply chain, who you're going to work with and partner with throughout the process, if you do not want to have the full liability and the full expense of dealing with the refurbishment in order to scale. And of course, Bike Flip has pivoted a little bit, which is very interesting to see, where they still have the same idea. They are doing them differently than when I first bumped into them. And now for me, I'm so intrigued as much as you are. And watch this space. They might even one day come as a guest on my podcast. So the last point I'm going to talk about in terms of the R ladder is the recycle and recover, which is, of course, what we know when we talk about this idea of circular economy and even I would say even waste management. Yes, recycling and recovering, remanufacturing and repurpose, they are all there in a way. Remanufacturing and repurpose, again, they're very expensive, but again, as a bike, it would be the same as sending let's say maybe a car, sending the engine or part of the engine back to the manufacturer so that they can reuse them in different cars or do their own magic. But of course, the further down you go the chain, as this can see in the image, and the more expensive it is. Recycle and recover even more so, because we need to try and do a lot more work to be able to recover as much of the material before it goes to waste. So I hope this really helps you a little bit, if you are in the startup world, whether you've already started working on something and you're wondering how you can design this idea of circular economy as part of your product, or rather than trying to retrofit that. This is a topic that a lot of people are going to talk about. There's a lot more impact investors out there, and I'm sure that this question is eventually going to be part of the standards questions that whether future clients or future employees or future investors might want to ask you. So if you are doing something and you think that we can benefit by just tweaking a few things in our design, whether it's a physical product or a software, whether we're talking about the supply chain, then do take the opportunity to discuss that. For anyone out there who's kind of listening to that and thinking, wow, this is great, we want to find out a lot more about this, then do please bear in mind that this is only part one of 3 episodes where we are really going to talk about conscious consumerism and also circular economy and the impact on startups and what startups can do. And I will be coming with amazing people that live and breathe the world so that we can share those great news to you. Now, let's go on to the second part. And this is where we start looking at some of the challenges that startups face when it comes to actually implementing it. I'm a strong believer that, many people want to do the right things, but sometimes there are many challenges out there, right? So if you are listening and even if it's not live and you have any questions on this, or you have any challenges as a startup, do put it in the comments now, or put in the comments and I will find you eventually, and we can start looking at the challenges that might stop you from continue to go into the journey of building your sustainable startup. One of the biggest challenges, as I said before, when it comes to really wanting to be sustainable, I'm sure that a lot of people, whether you actively think about it or passively think about it, first, it feels a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of players. It's great to say, yes, think about the supply chain, but I'm just one startup. How do I influence a lot of other people out there? And the other thing that's something that happens a lot, especially when I discuss it with people that come to our one-to-one tech and product mentoring sessions, is really about the challenge of the business model and also the price point that they have for the clients, and how through building their products they can start to look into that, because that's it's a valid problem. So I thought, why not put it as part of this session? So the first thing we look at is you cannot do it alone, right? Let's be completely honest, we cannot do it alone. Even larger organizations that are trying to tackle those challenges are not doing it alone. You need to be able to collaborate with a lot more people in the industries. And that's quite interesting and quite exciting as well, because it's really changing how people think about this idea of innovation, especially if you are a founder who believe that it's better to work on your own thing, on your own side, and don't tell anybody else. Well, if you're gonna be able to succeed in this world, that's not gonna work. I don't think it worked before, and I don't think it's going to work now. So it's really about thinking a little bit about your connections and how you can approach other people, whether we're talking about universities, policymakers, so the community, and see how you can really work together, share knowledge to be able to close the gap. That's the way you could do that, is again by building partnerships with all of those organizations. If you would like to find out more about partnerships and this idea of working with others, do check out episode 68, where we talked about the hustler mindset and tools for hacking startup growth. We also have other episodes, I can't remember on top of my head, but we do have other episodes that tackle this idea of building partnerships. If you don't find anything, do find me. And if it's something that I haven't answered before, you know me, I'm very transparent. I'm happy to help you on here and do a live on that episode. So do put something on the chat if you want to know how you can start building partnerships. Again, this is something that, when I first started as a founder, coming from a technical background, software engineer, it was like, sales, partnerships, what's that about? And now, building my podcast and all of the work that I do, partnership has been a big thing to get there. And I believe strongly that partnership is also something that will help you if we want to build a better world and in the ideas of the startup that you are working on. The second one, and I love this one, investors are not donors. And the reason why I said that is it's been quite interesting seeing the shift that's happening at the moment, right? There's a lot of talks about impact investors. And it's for some people, yes, they really want to focus on impact and sustainability startups. Others, it's questionable whether this is more of a buzzword or marketing, because everything in terms of sustainability impact is really trending at the moment. So you need to kind of bear that in mind. Regardless of who you're approaching, do remember that investors, as much as they want to help, will also want to see a profitable business model. So if you go in there thinking that, yes, I've got a great idea, I will solve this problem, or you will face exactly the same challenges that every other startup face. And even more so, if, for example, your price point is much higher, then you need to have the answers on how are you going to make this profitable. Having said that, though, one exciting conversation I can't wait is coming up is with Andrew Brisbane from Alia. I think it's episode 80. Is the real cost of sustainability in the startups ecosystems. Do come and watch that episode, because we are going to focus about this idea. On one hand, yes, startups need to understand that, in fact, investors are not donors and they need to deal with all of that. On the other hand, if the startup ecosystem and the way the investors operate at the moment doesn't change and adapt, are we really going to reach the level of innovation that we need to reach to encourage change of behaviors from the industry, from the startups, and also from consumers? So do sign up on that, because Andrew is an expert, especially when we start talking about accelerators, ecosystem, and the impact world. I know this is going to be exciting. There's a lot more I can say about this, but I'm not going to spoil it, as I'm bringing a fantastic guest to really dive in and talk about this episode. The next point to think about, which is one of my favorites, as I work a lot with tech and product. Build it and they will come, because they care. That's never worked with non-impact startups, and I don't think it's going to work either with impact startups either. If you're going to build a product, you need to know how you are going to go out there and attract the people. Yes, in your marketing, in everything that you do, especially right now, we know that there's a lot of people out there that are actively looking for solutions that they can use, especially in terms of this impact world. Yet, without storytelling, without a proper strategy, launch strategy, and how you are going to really share the words out there, you might end up working thinking that, yes, I've got the best solution here. When you open the door, nobody will come. And a big thing here, and something that I'm going to focus on just to help, is how you can use storytelling in your marketing and as part of building your product so that you can really attract people. One of the things that I've seen people do well, of course, is video. Videos really help people to connect with you, to connect with your story. Yes, you can write blogs, because I think blogs are still relevant and will always be relevant, especially from an SEO perspective. But videos of your products will help you. Now, when I talk about videos, one thing that I really love to encourage people to do, especially if they are coming up with innovative ideas, is to look back at and starting kind of keeping a record, even stories of their own journey. Because people love your journey, and if you convert that in video, you do have a strong story to tell. Then think about the journey of people that you are working with as well, that you are connected to, because that is also very, very important. So if you can bring them to share the stories, that will help in a big way. Interviews is also really good. So if you are building something, premium product, and you want to find out more in terms of interviews, then to help the people your potential client and customer to find out more about interviews, then that will really help. You can do them again. Instagram is a great way, whether you do it live or however is part of what you do. But again, do make sure that you have something that people can connect with. if, for example, you have a product that's a little bit more expensive, we talked about pricing. If you have a product that's a little bit more expensive, then help your potential consumers to understand why that price point is more expensive. We see that a lot these days, especially when it comes to production of coffee, for example. Prices are increasing a little bit because we are going more down a more ethical way than we used to do it before. And that goes back all the way to paying farmers better than before, to looking at different ways of distributions, different ways of packaging. And there is an associated cost with that. Of course, build it as will come doesn't work. So having a higher price, you might say, might deter customers. But if you do use a strong storytelling as part of your branding, your marketing, all the way to the way that you're building the product, that will really help you to move forward. That's what I always believe in, transparency. As I'm very transparent myself, and I think that could really help you move forward. So if you wanted to find out more information on this idea of storytelling, then please do check my podcast. In fact, we do have a playlist. I think the playlist is about product tips, something like that. Just go to YouTube at Athena Leaders, then check the playlist, and there's one specific about products. There's a lot of tips there that we talk about product stories and what you can do to actually make sure that people come when you open the doors. And in terms of practical examples of stories and how to use that, I've mentioned the washing tablet. Of course, they don't have a lot of stories there. It's more in terms of the designs, but it's something that they're also reusing their marketing, because they know that they've looked at the customers as part of the product design. What are their worries? What are the issues? And they've created a product through that, and now they're telling the story with that. The other thing, of course, when you're going to tell the story, making sure that you really understand your target market, because one story works well for one target market or one type of customers, but it might not work well for the other. For example, if you're looking for in terms of selling directly to clients and you're selling coffee, yes, going with personal stories will definitely get you a lot of people on Instagram, and they might be aware of your product. But if it's the only part of time when you tell them the story, you are missing other opportunities. So think about the packaging as well. Your packaging can tell a story, because once they have the product in their hands, then it gives them a chance to try your coffee, find out more about you within the story that you've included in the packaging, and who knows, they might refer you to other people. One example that I've noticed myself when it comes to selling directly to a customer in terms of storytelling was shoes or trainers. I bought some new trainers, Nike trainers, for my CrossFit, and absolutely loved it. And what I loved about buying new trainers, I don't know about you guys, I love the smell of new trainers, but I always loved how it's beautiful packaged. The downside of this beautiful packaging that we usually get is that you have the box with the branding, and then you have the other box where they do for the distribution. So what Nike did was to actually eliminate one box. So there was only the one box, and that the item were directly in that box. So of course it's better for our world. But the other trick that they had in that one box, the way they designed inside the box, they explain exactly what they did, right? Why they did it, and the impact. And I thought, that's it. They didn't have to create even more brochures, leaflets, or other things like that. They really used the packaging cleverly outside in terms of distribution, and inside in terms of some aspect of their branding, to remind us that yes, it's still us. And I know you were expecting 2 boxes, but this is why we've done it. And when I was preparing for this episode, for some reason, I remembered that. So I will say that this is an effective way of marketing your product. And another exciting story that I'm going to tell, which I think will really, really help you in terms of not just being, in just getting to your clients, but the entire journey that an amazing entrepreneur is going through. We are going to hear about that in episode 81, how a startup is building products for conscious consumers. So this is really, really exciting. It's part of this series. And we are going to look at, just shaving razors and those kind of things that we use all the time. We know that most of them are made of plastic, the impact on the ocean. So how is a startup reimagining how we can do that in a better, ethical way, and how through their journeys, they've managed to completely to deal with a lot of the challenges that I've talked about in this episode. Not gonna say more on that, just not to spoil the surprise. Do remember that if you want to really dig deep in terms of everything that we've talked about, especially the building the product and some aspects of that, do join our free monthly one-to-one tech product mentoring sessions. We'd love to speak to you and connect you with other experts that can really help you on your journey. Thank you as well to the comments that we've been getting on the show. We have ones about interesting to follow you and learn about this. The second comment is thanks for this. It's very insightful. So thank you very much for posting. Anybody out there, do remember to subscribe. This is only episode 1. There's three episodes in this series, so that we can really go into details from manufacturing, product ideas, investors, accelerators, even the entire ecosystem. The last one, and this is the last bit because I've got another exciting story, and it's a story of Zipcar, which you probably wondering, Zipcar? What is Zipcar and what has it got to do with circular economy? But the last one I would say in terms of this idea of attracting clients, whether even investors and storytelling, and part of that even designing, is to be mindful of jargons and buzzwords. We do have an episode toward the end of March for those who are following me on a regular basis, and those who are watching it later, well, just check the channel. We have an episode coming up on jargon and buzzwords and the headaches that gives to non-tech startups founders, right? So now imagine how your potential customers might have the same headaches because of the way you might communicate with them. When I was preparing for these episodes, which is why I really wanted to start with first talking a little bit about this entire world. I asked a few people, words like conscious consumerism, conscious consumers. Yes, they are trendy, they're great for SEO, and I did myself for SEO and attract more people, but I always make sure that I explain what they actually mean. Some people use the word recycling, which we understand, upcycling, what does it actually mean? You don't really know, but when you use easier language that people can relate with, you use easier examples. For example, in this episode, I talk a lot about coffee and bikes, because I know those are things that, regardless of the industry, most people will have an idea of what I'm talking about. So please don't lose people by using too many jargons and the likes. Now let's look at Zipcar. This episode would not be enough if I hadn't looked further into this idea of the people who have completely changed industries in a way, and Zipcar is one of those. For those who don't know, Zipcar is a kind of a car hire / sharing service. Interestingly, and the reason why I picked Zipcar, because there's so many other models out there, because Zipcar, the idea and the foundation was created back in 1999 by two women, which I believe is Davidson and Chase. I think so. If not, we put the name in the show notes for you to find out. Those two women were worried about what we are worrying today. It's very interesting that was even before the year 2000s, right? So people were already worried about the issue that we are facing and that we are dealing with today. Back in the days, it wasn't so trendy, but they were still had this idea of sustainability in mind. The issue that they faced was, I think they both had kids, and back in the day, people used to, buy a car, you own your car, or you get a taxi. That was it. Or if you wanted to hire a car, there are some services where you will go and hire a car. But they thought, why would everybody just own their car? They're creating this concept of hiring a car in the model that we have today. I don't know if you've seen that, because this is very common in many, especially large cities. I think even smaller cities have them. You download an app, and for example, a Zipcar app, and then you go out there. There is a place where the car is parked. You unlock the car through your app. You have the keys, and then you pay using by hour or mileage, or depending on the model of the company that you are using. It meant that it's a lot more accessible. Thinking about living in big cities like London, Madrid, if the transport system, there's a lot of metro underground, you can walk to many places, you can take scooters and bikes. If we reduce the number of people who own cars, but give them the possibility to access cars when they need to have a longer journey, or maybe they only need a car 1 hour a week to do a big shop, or maybe go to the mountains for the day, something like that. Why not kind of why not change the model? And in fact, it's a great idea. Now, looking at it in what year are we now? 2023. It's obvious for us. But back in the days, you have to think about the challenges that they had to go through in terms of education, in terms of trying to get people to move from the concept of, oh, I love my car is my toy, and I cannot imagine someone else sitting in his car and then I will then take it. What about my belongings? What if someone steals the car? Or what about vandalism? And all of those kind of things. Surprisingly, for those who don't know, well, you probably have guessed, it wasn't an easy journey for them. And in fact, the entire history of Zipcar is fascinating, which I'm not going to go through in this. Anyone interested, do some research or speak to me. I'll give you details from that research. When they first started with developing the ideas, they first raised about $75,000. And of course, just to kind of build the concept and absolutely everything they wanted to do. Few weeks before their launch, they were down to the last $68 in their bank account. And strike of luck, one angel investor jumped in and gave them $25,000 so that they can continue. And the rest is history. Through the fantastic and hard work that they had to do to really change behaviors, there's a lot of things that have born out of that. Of course, I'm not saying that they were the only people. There were a lot of people involved that helped them make that dream through. But if it wasn't for this that started back in 1999, I'm not sure that today we would have jumped so quickly when it came to this idea of sharing bikes or sharing scooters and things like that. I hope that this was useful and interesting to you. If you have any questions, well, you know where to find me. As usual, love to answer live, love to communicate with you, and do join our one-to-one free monthly tech product sessions, and do follow us and subscribe to find out the next couple of episodes that are coming up as part of this story, as this is something very important, very exciting that we are looking at. And many startups have been asking me this kind of questions. So I thought, why not answer them live? In the meantime, do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.